So let's talk about one of the most chaotic and yet absolutely pivotal decades in India's freedom struggle, the 1920s. We're talking about a time of serious confusion, heated debate, and some truly radical new ideas. And that really is the central question, isn't it? What happens when a revolution just loses its leader? This one question, it hangs over everything in India in 1922. It's the challenge that's going to define the whole decade and really set the stage for everything to come. All right, let's get into it. So let's set the scene. You've got this massive, nationwide non-cooperation movement. And then boom, it's abruptly called off. To make things worse, its leader, Mahatma Gandhi, is arrested. And just like that, the Indian National Congress, which was pretty much the main engine of the whole freedom struggle, is suddenly leaderless and in total disarray. So, with no clear path forward, you can imagine what happens next, right? A huge debate just erupts inside the Congress Party. The question itself was simple enough, but the answer? Oh, that was anything but. It really boiled down to this. What's our next move? Do we try to work within the British system to break it from the inside? Or do we just boycott it completely and build our strength on the outside? And this one debate, it basically splits the party right down the middle into two clear camps. On one side, you've got the Swarajists. They were all about a more, let's say, pragmatic approach. Their plan? Get elected into the legislative councils and just obstruct the British government from the inside out. But on the other side, you had the no-changers. These guys were fiercely loyal to Gandhi's original plan. For them, it was simple. Boycott everything British and focus on building strength from the ground up, at the village level. And when you look a little closer, you see just how deep this split went. I mean, look at the leaders on both sides. These are heavyweights. You've got C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru leading the Swarajists, and on the other side, staunch Gandhians like Vallabhbhai Patel with the no-changers. The Swarajists thought all that grassroots social work was just too slow. But the no-changers were convinced it was the only way to get the nation ready for the next big fight. And here's the kicker. Even Gandhi, who was a firm no-changer at first, eventually came around and reconciled with the Swarajists. It just goes to show you how messy and complicated this whole period really was. Okay, so while the bigwigs in Congress were locked in this huge internal debate, something else was happening. The ground was literally shifting under their feet. All across the country, you had these new, really powerful ideas and movements starting to bubble up, and they had nothing to do with this whole in or out argument. You know, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia had sent shockwaves around the world, and India was no exception. Socialist and communist ideas really started to take root. You had leaders like M.N. Roy and S.A. Dangi who started organizing, and by 1925, the Communist Party of India was formally established. But what's super important here is that these ideas weren't just on the fringes. They started influencing the younger, up-and-coming generation inside Congress. We're talking about rising stars like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose. And this wasn't just about abstract ideologies, It was about real action on the ground. Students were fired up, forming their own political leagues. Industrial workers were organizing like never before. The All India Trade Union Congress, the AITUC, gave workers a national voice, and that led to some absolutely massive strikes. I mean, when the first ever May Day was celebrated in India in 1923, it was a clear signal that a brand new class-conscious force was now part of the freedom struggle. And this is such a crucial point. The fight for freedom wasn't just about getting rid of the British. For so many people, it was also a fight for social justice inside India. You had these incredibly powerful movements led by giants like Periyar and B.R. Ambedkar that were taking on the centuries-old caste system head-on, demanding basic equality and respect for lower caste communities. Meanwhile, you had another group that was just getting fed up with the slow pace of all this political debate, and they decided to take a much more direct and, a more violent path. We're talking about the revolutionaries. But this wasn't just a rehash of old methods. This new wave of revolutionaries came armed with a totally new, radical ideology. At the very heart of this new movement was the Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, the HSRA. And you gotta pay attention to that middle word, socialist. That was a game changer. Under leaders like the fearless Chandrasekhar Azad and the incredibly charismatic Bhagat Singh, the goal wasn't just to kick the British out anymore. The new mission was to establish a socialist republic in their place. And their actions? I mean, they were audacious. They were designed to grab headlines, and they absolutely did. You had the Kokori train robbery, which was basically to fund their operations. Then there was the assassination of a police officer to avenge the death of a beloved nationalist leader. And of course, the infamous bombing of the Central Assembly in Delhi. Every single one of these acts was calculated. It was designed to be a powerful statement. Now, here's the thing you have to understand about the assembly bombing. It was never about killing people. In fact, the bombs were specifically designed to be non-lethal. The real goal, the master plan, was to get arrested and turn the courtroom into a massive stage. It was a brilliant and incredibly dangerous strategy to use the trial and all the newspaper coverage that came with it to broadcast their revolutionary and socialist ideas to every single corner of India.
So just picture the scene, right? You've got Congress tied up in debates, the socialists are organizing, the revolutionaries are taking direct action, the whole movement is fragmented, it's going in a dozen different directions, and then the British make a colossal blunder, an insult so deep, so profound, that it starts to pull all these scattered groups back together.
And it all came down to this one slogan, a slogan that just echoed across the entire subcontinent. Suddenly, for a moment, all those internal fights and disagreements, they just vanished, replaced by a single, powerful, unified voice of defiance. Simon, go back. So what was the Simon Commission? Well, it was a British committee sent over to figure out India's political future. The problem? The huge, glaring problem? It didn't have a single Indian member on it. Can you believe the arrogance? An all-white group coming to decide India's fate without a single Indian voice in the room. It was a total slap in the face. Naturally, this sparked nationwide protests. It even led to a challenge from a British lord who basically taunted Indians, daring them to prove they could even agree on a constitution for themselves. Well, you know what? Challenge accepted. In what was a truly unprecedented show of unity, nearly every single Indian political party came together. They formed a committee led by Motilal Nehru, that's Jawaharlal's father, and they had one clear mission: draft a constitution for a free India. And let me tell you, the document they came up with was absolutely remarkable. The Nehru Report, as it came to be known, was basically a blueprint for a modern, democratic, secular India. It called for 19 fundamental rights, things like universal adult suffrage, meaning votes for all adults, and equal rights for women. I mean, these were incredibly progressive, forward-thinking ideas for the 1920s. But the Nehru Report had one key recommendation that was, let's just say, already starting to feel a bit outdated. It called for dominion status, which basically means self-government, but still within the British Empire. And for the younger, more radical nationalists, that just wasn't going to cut it anymore. The goalposts were about to shift in a very, very big way. And you can see that shift crystal clear right here. The whole debate wasn't about how to work with the British system anymore. Nope. The new demand, really pushed by the younger generation, was for Purna Swaraj. That means complete independence, total freedom, no more ties to the British Empire, period. And this wasn't just talk either. To make it happen, Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose created the Independence for India League. Think of it as a powerful pressure group right inside Congress with one mission: to force the party to adopt this new, uncompromising goal of complete freedom. And guess what? It worked. They succeeded. In the landmark year of 1929, at its historic session in Lahore, the Indian National Congress made it official. It declared that its one single ultimate goal was now Purna Swaraj. The decade of division and debate was finally over. A clear, final objective had been set in stone. And to really mark this historic shift, at the stroke of midnight on December 31st, 1929, Jawaharlal Nehru, now the president of the Congress, hoisted the tricolor flag on the banks of the Ravi River. It was this incredibly powerful, symbolic moment that not only closed a decade of disarray, but also signaled the dawn of the final, decisive phase of the struggle for freedom. So, a decade that kicked off in total confusion ended with a powerful, crystal-clear Declaration of Independence. You know, all those different factions, the heated debates, the revolutionary acts, in their own ways, they had all re-energized the nation. But it leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? Had this chaotic, messy, but totally formative decade really forged the unity and the strength India would need for the immense final fight that was still to come?